in hindsight, I recognize that my comments could have put personnel on the defense, and I apologize for that.
Steve Sherlock here for Franklin Matters, Franklin Public Radio, available anywhere, anytime, on the internet, in your browser at wfpr.fm, or in the local Franklin, Mass. FM radio dial. Yeah, the dial with the knobs or the push buttons. 102.9 is the number. Here in our glorious studio again today with our Town Councilor Ted Cormier-Leger. Ted, how are you doing? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Steve. Nice to see you again.
It's good to be seen in a studio where we can have a conversation.
Yeah, and we're not freezing our butts off outside.
And even if the weather is just a little bit warmer, we're still in winter, so it's...
the groundhog did his thing, so we're here for a bit.
We're here. It's New England. So we haven't talked since the election, and how are things going?
Things are going good. Things are going good. It's definitely taken a little getting used to, with 7 brand new people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of explaining, which is fine. I remember
normal.
Being the new guy, right? So it's like you have to sort of take some steps back and help people along and answer a lot of questions, and it's been good. And I've been enjoying the new role as clerk. Shout out to Glenn Jones, because I never appreciated how much work it was until I had to sit there and read everything and write everything and
resolutions,
sort through all the notes and find this and find that. But it's going good.
Good.
It's going good.
And your signature is going to end up on a lot of official docs going forward.
Yeah, I'm the new John Hancock of Franklin. So,
Have you been practicing your penmanship too?
Well, it's legible. I think.
It's legible.
Yeah. Although Nancy, our town clerk, has slapped my hand a couple of times, because she says, I really like to have pretty notes, and I like to have things be buttoned up in a certain way that go into the permanent file.
Sure.
And sometimes the stuff I give her has had
just a little less.
Things like written down on the side or sort of scratched in, because there wasn't like a formal place to put it, and so I'm learning.
Yeah.
So I had some laughs with her.
It's been a little bit challenging to the extent that, as opposed to, and it's neither right nor wrong, but, generally a resolution will come up and there may be a minor modification, and it's relatively minor, so it can fit.
Yeah.
But when you get additional modifications or multiple modifications, doing it on the fly is a bit of a challenge.
Well, and there's been a lot of amendments. There's been a lot of roll calls, but it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Everybody's finding their way, and so far, I think the new group is getting along pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely a lot of different perspectives, and
right.
Which is good. It's healthy.
Diversity of opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. No.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss some of my former counselors, right? Because we had a good groove and we became good friends. But I also welcome.
Well, and that's part of kind of the learning curve that you're going through, because you had done that a few years ago, and now you've got 7 going through, and every time something comes up, it's the new thing. So it requires that extra explanation, maybe a few extra questions, and I knew going in this particular year, it was going to be a lot of new things for them. And then over time, things, because it's a cyclical nature, you'll get things, once you get, an ABCC thing, then you'll the second time, you'll know a little bit more about it. Oh, it'll be a little bit easier. Or maybe there's a nuance that's different, which, can always happen. But as you start going through the process, you'll be learning. So things should be getting easier and easier later this year. But in the meantime, there's a lot of newness, and that's okay. I understand that.
It's all good. It's all good.
It's beneficial as well, to the extent, taking the positive side, which I tend to do. Anybody watching, if they're not familiar with what's going on, this is a good time for them to get into it, because they're getting the basics explanations at the start of each thing. Mm-hmm. And if they, were clueless, respectfully, life was busy, they were doing other things. Now they're getting the benefit of, oh, this is the explanation, and then this is what they're doing. that should make it a little bit easier to understand what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, and just engagement of any kind is a good thing. So just getting more people to tune in, to understand, even if they pick up 1/10 of a particular topic, they're more educated than they were before, right? So it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
So you had at least one of the changes that was done recently, this last meeting on February 11th. So we're post that meeting doing kind of a quarterbacking session, which, condensing the meeting a little bit, but at least getting behind the scenes in terms of some of the other themes and threads that perhaps weren't revealed in the discussions.
Sure, yeah.
Which for the listeners, okay, what just happened and what does it mean for us as residents? Those are kind of the two key questions that we generally approach with. And you're familiar with that, so we'll kind of go through that. But one of the pieces you did was you changed kind of the agenda order, moving the council comments up closer to the citizen comments to give you two things. One, a quicker, easier time instead of taking that note and then trying to remember it later in the meeting. I think that seemed to work.
We've been talking about it for years.
Right.
And to be able to respond in a quicker manner to public comments. We can't address public comments during public comments.
You still can't do that indirect
piece. There can't be the back and forth.
Right.
But if our comments are immediately after, and somebody just brought something up at the mic, we can perhaps respond or ask Jamie to respond or ask a department head to respond. Like, we're hoping that it'll make people feel a little more heard.
True.
Because oftentimes with the old format, it could be 3-4 hours before we got to our comments. Sometimes it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. Everybody's tired. Things get forgotten about. And then, I've always said, like, well, that's not ideal. Right. And it's not fair to make people wait to midnight to be heard either. So we're going to try this. It was one of the changes that we talked about as a group, and I think it's going to be good.
Yeah, because the only risk, as I see it, during the course of the meeting, there'll certainly be discussions, as there have been. And it was always good, at least, for kind of wrapping the meeting with your comments, which by moving the comments up front, clearly they're closer to the citizen piece, but then you kind of don't get a last say. So I don't know how critical that'll be, how much it'll be. We'll see. It's a trial.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely still have future agenda items, which at least on the last few months have been sort of morphed in with councilor comments. So I think if somebody's got something they really need to say, they'll find a way to say it. But it's okay.
Right.
What I have enjoyed with this new group is there's much more of a back and forth. There's much more of a little bit more casual. How do you feel about this? Why don't you talk about this? You already spoke, but we'll let you speak again.
Right.
And yes, it's making meetings run long, but it's also allowing, I think, for a little bit more of a comfortable conversation. And everybody is certainly feeling heard from everybody that I've spoken to. They're enjoying the fact that, I got to say what was on my mind, and I got my questions answered. So.
And you were still smartly, at least to the extent that if somebody, especially with, and getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but in kind of the capital budget discussion, if somebody brought a department head up, then the other questions for that department head make sense to have them go at the same time rather than having the department head keep coming back up. So that kind of interaction, which didn't always happen before, I mean, to a certain extent it did. Certainly it happens more formally in the formal budget hearings, which this wasn't yet. That's down the road. But
yeah, and the idea with preliminarily talking about the budget, Wednesday, I think was Jamie trying to get an understanding from the 9 of us about some direction and about some priorities and just, if I was to fix this way, what do you think? And it seemed like the predominant consensus was we don't want to fix the entire budget problem with free cash because that seemed irresponsible. But we may need to patch a couple holes with that going forward. And to the extent I don't know yet what positions that means will be restored because there's still so many unknowns. The state budget, still has to go through several iterations, and for the this was really early for us to be even having a budget
and that's where I think the intent was more, this is where we are now. He's at least incorporated the governor's numbers, but then he'll have at least the House numbers, I think, by the time he comes back for, his formal release of his budget. Mm-hmm. School committee already has done their budget, so they're coming in at 2.5, and having already cut 2-something because of the failed override, cut 3-something because of the redistricting, which is 3-something permanent. Mm-hmm. So and then the prior year they'd cut another 2-something. So that's 7, almost 8-something in 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. 3 budgets. That's a lot of money they've taken out of the budget there. Primarily because of the redistricting. That's much more efficient. Yes, there's still some issues with that hopefully capital and/or something will eventually resolve, particularly with the traffic, because previously the 2 other facilities that are now being used primarily by entry at least had elementary and middle, so you staggered the traffic arrivals.
Right.
Now all the traffic's arriving at the same time, and there can be some relayout, but that costs money, and we haven't got there yet.
Yep, and hopefully they'll I should say not hopefully, but it does take some patience from the public, and it takes some people being just willing to accept that this is all new territory and that they're trying to figure it out.
Right.
I'm glad to see that the police are going to help with some of that because I think having them on board will kind of lessen some of that anxiety of the folks in the cars. And we saw repeatedly on Facebook people commenting about people are sort of flying around the cars and flying around the buses, and somebody's going to get hit, and nobody wants that. So
and I think the school's been taking some steps as well, from what I've heard through the grapevines, that they're not allowing queuing before a certain time, and people, human nature being what it is, well, if the line's going to be there, let me go early. And then the early becomes earlier, the early becomes earlier, and it just goes the wrong way.
I'm waiting at 10 o'clock in the morning for my 2 o'clock pickup. That's not a good idea.
No. So going back to kind of the agenda, you did have an ABCC piece, which is one of the relatively cleaner corporate adjustments, and the clarification questions, but that's
and it was fascinating that even that brought up a lot of questions from counselors, but whereas before I think we would just be sort of aggravated that we even had these things come before us. But that was a simple change of officers from Shaw's. It was kind of a slam dunk. It's not even something we have any control over, but it still comes down to the local group has to approve, right?
Technically, you have to approve it because you're a licensed authority.
You have to, but what are you going to do? They changed officers at a state level. I'm not gonna tell them they can't.
No, and that's part of the process, and
Yeah, I know. There's been some discussion about trying to make that a little easier at the state level, but. We'll see.
Well, there's a couple of things, at least from proposed legislation, that's at least pending. whether that truly gets acted on and it changes the process, that's up to our legislation delegates to figure out. So, in the meantime, you do what you need to do.
Right.
Yeah. And then the 2 key items were certainly you got, as we started talking about, the fiscal forecast the next 5 years with the latest numbers. And we're getting a sense, and at least from my understanding, for the listeners' benefit at least, recognizing that having had the 2 failed overrides, Jamie is proposing to use $2 million from free cash, so rather than putting it totally in the capital budget, to hold it, to at least give us, rather than making deep cuts, which because we don't have an increase in revenue to balance the budget, you have to cut. To use the $2 million to kind of buy us some time, potentially next year as well, to get to the point where it has been discussed. And I think that's one consensus that is clear. The council agrees we need a strategic plan in terms of how are we going to get out of the structural deficit.
Correct. Yep.
But in order to do that, it takes time, it takes meetings. So at least on an interim, we'll use the $2 million because we've got 4.5, we'll use 2. That still allows us to do something with the capital, which we'll get into. But then this allows us at least to kind of keep a steady state.
Yeah, and while we agree that we need a strategic plan and we need to possibly fill some operational gaps with some free cash, I don't think we are fully on board as a group about quite bringing back everybody that Jamie suggested, right? Because you heard from several of us that that's not really fair to do to somebody. We want to hire you, but a year from now we don't know if we'll have the money to keep this. Well, that's a tough sell to somebody for a job, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not fair to do to the community to get used to that coming back and then having to take it away again. And one of the comments that I made, which I know many agree, but if you replace everything that we lost from the failed override, then it does somewhat seem to people that you found the money. And most people don't get into the weeds and understand the difference between the operational budget and capital and what is free cash and where did that come from. And,
right.
I certainly didn't as a resident taxpayer prior to being on the council. So I think we're going to try to spend the next few months really looking at, okay, what are some of those priorities that we really have to bring back? And then what are some things that they still remain on sort of the want wish list? And we'll see if we can strategize and figure it out. And obviously, there's a lot of things there, right?
There's
the
many moving
deputy
targets.
town administrator. There was the Sundays at the library. There's a part-time nurse at the senior center. There's 2 SROs for the police department that were servicing the schools and other things, and a gigantic chunk out of DPW.
Help me clarify, because at least from my understanding, being the reporting with all these meetings, et cetera, the senior center start there because of their restructure of some positions within. They fixed to bring back the part-time at even less hours now.
She said less hours, but yeah.
And that should still continue, so that should not be part of the budget piece.
Correct, it should, yeah.
There was a discussion in the October-November timeframe because just prior to the tax rate setting with the adjustment to the budget so that the 2 firemen could come back to firemen and paramedics to fund the ambulance.
Correct.
On that third shift, again, the 40 hours, they had not had those people because they had been holding off hiring them. From what we've understood, they may be close to getting it in a February timeframe.
Yeah, and the paramedics in particular were being funded through fees.
Correct.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Totally. And it certainly, the community needs that third ambulance out and about and responding.
Correct.
And hopefully that is a model that just can sustain itself. As long as those fees keep coming in, you can afford those people.
Right, and that's the nature of that particular operation, because the irony is by having the third ambulance, you have an opportunity for more fees. If you rely on more of a mutual aid, you don't get those fees.
Yeah. No, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
And, but there are clearly other cuts that were needed that we have to look at.
Right. And so at least in terms of the interim, what's been done this year, yes, it still leaves the deputy administrator, whose resource clearly Jamie still needs, at least in the office. The 2 SROs, the Sunday library, there still are things there that are will be interesting discussions.
It will be interesting discussions, and to the point you just made about our town administrator, like we have to find a way to provide him the support that he needs to properly run the town.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be in the form of a deputy town administrator. It may be in some other creative allocations, but the unfortunate reality of the budget that has decimated his department, it's noticeable. And we don't have
Very noticeable.
We don't have the staff anymore for covering a lot of the subcommittee meetings.
Right.
We don't have somebody working on communications and kind of sending out newsletters and responding on Facebook. And
right.
I mean, he doesn't even have an admin, right? So
he just has the one person, Julie alone.
He has Julie, who's doing a number of things, and he has Mark, our attorney, but he's not there all the time. So I think we owe it to him, and quite frankly, whoever sits in that seat, right? It's not just a Jamie issue. Yeah. It's whoever is sitting in the town administrator.
The administrator
role,
is
right?
executing. They're executing a $160 million budget.
Yep.
That's a legitimate operation, providing services to us in the community.
And it would be unheard of in the corporate world for a $160 million operational CEO to not have support. But we also understand that the other things just took priority because human services being what it is, you have to still be able to provide to people. So
right.
We'll continue to chip away at it.
Yep.
And
have some more discussions.
The strategic plan for those listening is at least the goal of, okay, we have a master plan document and we have a building document and we have all of these different pieces that have been worked on by volunteers and staff. Now we kind of need to roll it all together and have a higher level plan of what's the next 5 years look like, and how can we get from point A to point B, maybe a little bit of dreaming and also a little bit of like, well, what are the goals of the town? Like what, rather than just, all right, we're just going to sort of get by, right? But like how do things look? How do things play out? The huge piece that I see is sort of the chess game of, are we going to sell this property? Are we going to utilize this property? Are we going to do any sort of a swap? Are we going to... There's so many different things at play.
There's so many different options. I was using the domino reference because, but it's the same thing. Once you decide on this piece, then you've got potential other pieces that still need decisions, and do the dominoes just fall that way? Or if you go another way, it could be 2 or 3 options that are all legit, and how do you do that? Right. So
and we are interestingly enough, we're lucky right now to have some options as far as the discussion around Davis Thayer, the discussion around Parmenter, the discussion around the old rec facility on Beaver, and even some other things that have come up throughout the town. But we're...
And then depending upon what the police station decision is, you potentially have the other police station on 911 Panther Way as an option.
Everything takes money, though, and everything takes...
time,
like you said, dominoes
and resources.
But if you make this decision over here, how does that affect this decision over here? And, and I think you and I have talked about this offline a few times, but like the dream of a community art center, right? Can we have what Hopkinton has?
Sure.
Can we have a public facility for not just for painting, but maybe for music or for dance or for things that, and no offense to any of our private organizations that do that and do that really, really well.
Correct.
Right? But there clearly is a need for some other programming along those ways. But that's going to take, all right, where's that facility going to be? What nonprofit's going to come and run it? How is that going to be in conjunction with the town? There's going to be money that would need to be spent for a build-out. It took Hopkinton 20 years, right? From that little storefront that woman was running all the way to the beautiful space that she's running now. It and it took a lot of people coming together to figure
Sure.
it out. But
Yeah.
I particularly, as an advocate for the arts and for being an artist as well, and that's what my degree is in, I haven't let go of it,
Mhm.
right? So I've,
Right.
tried to continue to have those conversations with people about well, let's not lose sight of that, and let's see if that could come to Franklin, because
Agreed.
people need to also recognize Franklin has a gigantic creative economy. We have, a very active art community here
Right.
through not just with dance, but with painting, with poetry, with
Mhm.
writing, with music, and it needs to be
Just amongst
invested in, right?
the Black Box, the Circle of Friends, and even the Drummer Studio, you've got people that are internationally known coming here to perform or to do art in some format. Just with those three. And there's bunches of others that I've left out.
Yeah, and the visual artists in town have been truly begging for
They've been
space
on
for-
mobile
right, but for
places.
some sort of space to create and
Right.
space to exhibit.
Right.
And the Franklin Art Association temporarily had that nice little space with the bookstore downtown,
Mhm.
but the bookstore couldn't sustain itself and it went away, and now they're back and don't
Right.
have a place to
Yeah.
gather and to hang art and to have a critique, and so we and other communities have made these investments. They figured this piece out, and artists have a place to gather, and that fuels the local economy too, because that
Mhm.
brings people in, that supports our
Right.
restaurants, that
Right.
supports our hotels, all that.
Which
It's
is
all
part
connected.
of the local revenue between the hotel receipts and the food receipts. That those are local receipts that fortunately we've been doing fairly well with, and we need to
Yeah.
foster more of that, because not that that's going
Absolutely.
to solve the budget piece, but it certainly helps
Well, you'd miss it if it wasn't there,
for sure.
right?
Right.
But we're very lucky to have what we already have.
Agreed.
But we're trying
So
to,
much to be
trying to build
grateful
on it.
for
Absolutely.
to begin with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I can go to see Broadway talent in Franklin
Mhm.
on a Saturday night at the
Right.
Black Box is pretty
Right.
special.
Yep.
I can't do that just about
No,
anywhere
no,
else except
no.
maybe Boston
No.
or go down to Providence, right? But,
And then even Dean's doing Shakespeare next week. So any
Yeah.
Shakespeare lovers, student performances, they're not going to be bad.
no, I've gone to several plays there. They've
Yeah.
been great.
Yep, for sure. And then you get into the first pass of the capital budget. And as Jamie alluded and people have been able to see, we actually have a budget book this year specifically
Extensive.
for capital.
Yeah. Extensive, yeah.
With a 6-year plan with intentions to get to a 10-year plan, because clearly there are some departments, which also came up, some departments realistically don't have capital per se. They may have tech needs or facility needs, but then those come up through tech and facilities departments. But like the health department, even the museum, they don't really have kind of capital ones.
Right.
Museum technically had capital in terms of the renovation, but CPA funds covered that too.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and to be able to look at it in one place, and the staff did a nice job organizing it into tiers,
Yes.
was very helpful.
Yeah, especially at a first pass. I think the only real significant was that maybe flesh out the definitions of what's tier 1, 2, and 3 would help a little bit more, making sure that
and
we're all on the same page as to which one's which.
And truly, Steve, I think as a council, what we're going to see is delving into it a little bit deeper about what is considered a capital request and what truly should be an operational request.
Right.
It was
That's
debated,
been a philosophical discussion that's come up a couple of times.
It's been around, right? And I've brought it up before now,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
When we used to have capital subcommittee meetings,
Mhm.
I would bring it up and I'd say, well,
Right.
should the police and fire personnel really be standing here asking us for safety gear and for
Mhm.
tasers and for things that they need to do their job and to be safe?
Right.
Should the schools really have to ask for curriculum?
Right.
I would argue no, right?
Right.
That those things are
Yeah.
just should be baked in. But I also understand the other side of like, well, if they haven't been able to balance things, then this has been the alternative. So that's why earlier I said I think we may find ourselves in like we got to patch a few holes with free cash.
And that's a good point, because the definition was included in the budget, in the capital budget book, in terms of free cash and how revolving funds are handled. I've made a request, and they will be putting in, enterprise funds, how the revolving funds on the school side, because they're the equivalent, in my mind, having talked with the finance folks, that they're the equivalent. So a revolving fund for school side, it's transportation fees, athletic fees, club fees, student fees. Those have the similar pieces that if it comes in from transportation, it's spent on transportation. If it comes in on athletics, it's spent on athletics. The school committee has been violating their own policy in terms of keeping a budget level within that. So they're supposed to keep a year's worth, depending upon the size of however the year's volume is. Clearly transportation, 1 year's transportation is going to be more than athletic fees, but that's their policy. They've been deviating from that in using the funds to balance their budget. That's a policy decision. That's not a good one. It's not sustainable. And I've referenced the one time the school committee and town council met with a forensic audit was because of, coincidentally, a budget decision removed the finance person, the business administrator, promoted another individual who really didn't do what they were supposed to do, and thereby the audit report said we had accounting errors.
Oh, boy. How many years back is that?
It was actually in November 2007.
Okay.
It was released publicly on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so it was kind of buried in the rush, if you will. Not a great move, but I understand how it was done.
Yeah.
And then the
Before
joint,
my time.
I understand. And then the joint meeting happened in January, and two good things came out of that. Three, if you count that way. So in March, they hired Miriam Goodman, who brought in the finance stability and strict rigor to the school accounting side. It's continued to develop since then. The second piece was the policy to keep the year's worth in, because it was in the misaccounting for the revolving funds that led to the issue. And then the third piece, over time, the town and schools have continued to do their finance work, and we've had cleaner and cleaner budget reports since then, so that the management letter after 2015-16 didn't even exist.
Right. We haven't had one in a number of years. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But from 2007 through 14, 15, something in that area, there was always something that the town still needed to do to continue to set things up. So that's where we are from a historical perspective. The other piece, while we're at it, in terms of the revolving funds, but specifically in terms of the school budget, in regards to free cash, if they do have funds left over, that does go by law to free cash. It drops into the general fund. Realistically, it's about $3,000 to $5,000 a year for two reasons. One, they manage the budget almost to the penny very well. And number two, because the budget is 90% employees and benefits, it's a heck of a lot easier to do because, oh, by the way, if you got an employee, they're going to get paid and their benefits are going to get covered. And those are much easier to account for as opposed to, and it's not right or wrong, but DPW budget where you've got, tar and oil and electrical and all that other kind of stuff. Things fluctuate on a different scale, right? So they can contribute more to free cash, although they have kind of the equivalent of free cash in the enterprise funds, and those excess funds are counted in the stabilization accounts, which is also reconciled by the state on a regular basis, at least annually, to create the free cash. So, yeah, it gets complicated, but I've been learning all the time.
Yeah, and it's state requirements for how schools account for money is different than state requirements for how the municipal side accounts for money. So,
in many ways, they're the same, but they are separate. Right. Which is why you, as a council, just give one line item, $2, go have fun. Obviously, it's more than $2, but you just give the line item. Everything else is the school district and school committee's responsibility.
Right. And, obviously where we have a tremendous amount of crossover of municipal budgets that are impacting schools, there's definitely some
that
crossover.
Gets into the story of how we are in a structural deficit, because it was recognized years ago and then kind of patched in little ways. So there was an MOU, and we took the town took the custodians from the schools. Mm-hmm. Then the town took the rest of the facilities and the groundskeepers, so that the schools could focus more on the educational aspects. Mm-hmm. And things like that happened. Is from a state perspective that the per pupil students costing is still done. It's normalized at the state level with the net school spending accounting. Mm-hmm. So the town administration, finance says this is what we're spending to support schools. Schools does that. Things work out at the state level. So that's all there. But to your point in regards to, yes, should some things philosophically be in operations? Absolutely. I totally agree. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that over time, and the Chief Lynch mentioned it, we used to have patrol cars in the ops. And, oh, by the way, we got this free cash. Let's use that. And now we've got more room in ops budget to do the other things that they need to do.
But unfortunately, what we've seen is that the capital list gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Right?
Because we still don't have enough money. And even if, and I think the last time I saw it was between 150 and 225 million of DPW infrastructure type things.
Yeah.
Now, clearly, it's meant over time to do those.
Oh, sure.
And even if we had the 250, it couldn't get all done at once anyway.
No, but we'd be chipping away at it a little bit better.
Right.
Instead of, and this gets into more of the sort of philosophical differences, right? But I think I've been saying for a few years now with capital that some things we need to find a way to put some of those things into the operation budget, and it's going to be hard to do.
In addition to kind of the debt coverage line, there really should be a capital budget line. I totally agree. Yeah. In a perfect world, that should be there.
In a perfect world, and this is to our friends on the school side too, but like if there are things that every year you're going to need, which, let me back up. By definition, if you look at the original concepts of this capital free cash program, it was supposed to be for one-time special projects.
Correct.
It wasn't supposed to be for things that were going to be recurring every year that should be in your operating budget. So, as much as I want to see police and fire safety gear and equipment put back into operating, the same would apply to schools for curriculum, and we had a big discussion about Chromebooks, right? But
correct.
In theory,
I totally agree. It belongs in ops.
And I was outspoken about the Chromebook issue because for me, and I realized it was COVID and it was challenging, right? But when you accept that federal money to buy all these Chromebooks, you need to have a plan to pay for their maintenance and pay for their replacement.
And their plan was to use
their placement. Their plan was, we're going to turn to the town for the capital program.
Well, but that has always been the plan, to do that, and the town participated in that plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not debating that they were welcomed at the table, because it's just we're now at sort of this critical moment of, okay, that $100,000, just as an example for the Chromebooks, right? Like, that's a police car. That $100,000 is 1/10 of what's needed to now replace the fire truck that went down last week, when the chief looked at us and said, I can't even fix it anymore. I've got to go try to get a used one from another city or town, and it's going to be almost $1 million.
Right.
So in a perfect world, we would have this free cash capital program for those special requests, but we're using it to chip away at all these other things.
Yeah, and in a perfect world, the stabilization fund is also exactly what it's there for. That's a rainy day type thing, because you could take from the stabilization, and granted it takes 2/3 votes to come out, but then you also put together part of the strategic plan to bond that in something else, and thereby, cover it.
Yeah, and we may need to look at that to take care of this fire truck for sure.
Right.
And it's a shame that we've gotten to the point. I was talking with one of the battalion chiefs that, there's only 2 companies in the country that even make these fire trucks.
Correct.
And they're they're 4 or 5 years out from getting a new one to a city or town.
The lead times are 36, 48 months.
And the prices are ridiculous.
Correct.
Right. So that's a problem.
Oh,
right?
totally.
If I was a rich guy and I could go start my own fire truck creation company, I'd make a fortune. But I don't have that kind of capital in my personal bank account sitting around.
No.
But some of the certainly some of the discussion around capital that got a little heated Wednesday night was around differences of opinion on things that belong in operating versus belong in capital, even differences of opinion on things that should have been on the Tier 1 list that ended up on the Tier 2 list.
Well, and I understand this difference of opinion, but having sat through the school committee meetings and sat through the FinCom meetings, respectfully, that group, school committee, superintendent, technology director, worked and prioritized their requests. Their Tier 1 request was the Chromebooks because 6th graders are coming in September and going to need a device for 6 years. That's what the 100K is for. The 75K was to, as I understood it, continue to manage upgrades to the cameras because the entire infrastructure has a place, and Kevin will be getting more details, Kevin Harn, and from the facility side, or between Tim Reposer from the tech side, to give us that strategic plan from their processing. Because Tim also talked about the virtual servers, and this is a 2-year extension for maintenance.
Yep.
But then down the line, that entire thing is going to have to get replaced, right? But at least it's on the radar. We know we're going to need to do it.
And those of us that advocated for the Tier 2 safety request, as you heard, and it got approved to be brought over in this round, I think. And this is no offense whatsoever to FinCom or to the school committee or to the staff that did their priority list, but we just felt like if a safety issue made it to the list at all, that it was a concern. And given the unfortunate current environment and the world that we live in, we wanted to make sure that everything possible was done. That is not to say that the schools aren't safe. That was never the intention of the conversation. Like, our schools are very safe. Our police and fire and school staff do a fantastic job. So I hope the public understood that this was simply, we've been investing for years into these safety measures with the double entry and the buzzers and the cameras and the servers, and we've made these multi-million-dollar investments already. And if we don't keep up with it, then it's just going to be one more thing that doesn't get funded.
And that's where, to my understanding, the Tier 1, that was the 1.8 thereabouts, that really wanted to do that now. In the big picture, it was 4.5 for total free cash, 1.8 for the Tier 1, put 2 aside for the budget. And again, that's still another opportunity. But then you're left with 0.7 something, actually less than that, because you put the OPEB funds away, which hadn't been done the last couple of years. And then you're still left with 2 to 500, which, assuming things are relatively stable, could be the second pass of capital. So that 75 could have got addressed in a June timeframe.
It could have, right?
Could have.
We felt like it was more important to
Yeah,
do
and
it.
75 on the 1.8.
No, and
ultimately it was,
because, and to my earlier point, Steve, I think I'm a little bit sensitive to the project list that never gets funded, because every year we talk about these gigantic lists. DPW director comes before us with multi-million-dollar projects that can't get funded, and they just get put on a list and put on a list and put on a list.
Yeah, which is why we have the largest, oldest
the water tower, right? So, for me, it was just sort of a line in the sand of like, if it wasn't an issue, it wouldn't have made any list.
True.
Right. So, and in hindsight, I recognize that my comments could have put personnel on the defense, and I apologize for that. And I reached out to the superintendent and apologized for that. That wasn't my intention.
Right.
And when I commented about choices and about other things in the budget that could be looked at, it was simply that. It was simply everything, every department. It's not just schools. Every department is making difficult choices. Right. Every department is looking at, we're underfunded and we don't have enough staff, and we're making difficult choices. And I'm sure you heard Wednesday, I pushed back on even our recreation department, and I said, you gotta be thinking about some other creative ways to bring in some money, even though they're already a self-funded department.
Correct.
Right? But every little bit is going to help us. 10,000 here, 25,000 here, 50,000 here, whatever it might be, so that when the time comes, we can say confidently to the taxpayers in town, like, we're doing everything we can. I already feel like staff and volunteers are doing 110% anyway.
Right.
But, if we can, like I said to Ryan Jetty, if you can create a pass and a sticker program for Beaver Pond for the summer, like many town and state parks and federal parks around the country, $35 maybe as an example, and you're going to put it on your windshield and you're going to pull up and show your sticker.
Right.
Well, that can maybe, in theory, that money could help with somebody that's collecting the trash and a lifeguard maybe, or the attendant at the parking lot watching people come in and out. And I think parents and folks that use Beaver would probably say, yeah, okay, like a $35 pass isn't going to kill me, especially if the bathrooms are going to be reopened and the trash cans are going to be emptied at the end of the day, and because I like coming here with my kids. I think the other point I made to him was the cricket field that got built at Kennedy. If we have private groups using that, enter into a contract with them. If they're charging their members to be members, then part of that membership fee to those organizations can be, we got to pay the town of Franklin, I don't know, $100, $200 every time we come out and use it. Should be an
extension of the facility use fee.
Whatever it is,
or whatever.
Right? Let's just, and I recognize that Franklin people are part of the group that use the cricket. That's not the point, right? Like, these are expenses that, and it's not unheard of. You go to other towns. There's fees to use fields. There's fees to use these different types of things. So I hope that, I'm not intentionally trying to make like people have more work, but I do think you'd have a lot of parents to the like we had earlier about the traffic concerns at the schools. Well, if all of a sudden a third of the kids are staying in the building,
that would help.
It might help.
It might.
Right? And
if more people who are eligible to ride the bus actually rode the bus.
Well, that's another whole topic. Right. But
there's multiple solutions, including just potentially redesigning the drive-through loop to make it better to handle the volume, et cetera. So there's
possibilities, but thinking creatively about some of those revenue sources and what can be done, and ultimately trying with this council to work toward redefining the capital program so we can try to chip away at some of those longer, big picture infrastructure items.
But put that out there. We need to do this. We need more money for the roads. We need money for this. We need money. What is the bucket? And then how are we going to solve it over the next 5 to 10 years? Mm-hmm. That, to my understanding, takes everything else that's been in the master plan, the housing plan, the open space plan, and then puts the dollar amounts to it over some time. Mm-hmm. So realistically, what we've had is just, this is the budget and an override to get us through this year.
Right.
And then now we're in a hole because it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. I think we need, and coming out of, 2007 was the only one that passed. 2008 failed. 2010 failed. And after 2010, a committee was put together, the Long Range Planning Committee, and it was 8 or 10 people, mix of town, council, school committee, probably not, but definitely people, regular citizens were appointed. They were the ones who came up with the first 5-year fiscal forecasts. And from that point forward, it's part of the charter. Right? But that was in reaction to the questions that were being asked at 2010, and the override failed because we didn't have a plan. Well, since then, we've had the plan, but we haven't gone to that next step and said, we've got a forecast, how are we actually going to manage to the forecast? And you can't do it 1 year at a time because the structural deficit, by the way, since then has gotten deeper and deeper because instead of having the police cars in there in ops, instead of having the materials in ops, instead of having Chromebooks in ops, everything's been going the other way.
Right.
Stormwater should have been in ops. It's now a separate fee.
Yeah.
Right? Now we can continue to go, but I'm not sure how much because what other fee could we do? Living in Franklin fee? I mean,
we could. And I'm not really sure.
That's where
we're kind of kidding, but we're not kidding, right?
We're kidding, we're not kidding, but that's where it's our problem to solve.
Yeah.
And through lots of discussions, we're going to need to figure it out.
Well, and it's
not going to be done overnight.
No, and it's interesting because we've talked about this sort of like larger issue with just being in the Northeast, right?
True.
Because you can look at other parts of the country are much more regionalized. They're much more county-driven.
Yeah.
There's a lot more shared service models, and there's pluses and minuses to that.
California has 4 911 centers. We have in excess of 250. And we at least have a regionalization step with the MEC.
Right.
So we're on that forefront. We were forced to it, but it's bringing benefits to us.
But it's good. It's working.
It's working.
Regionalization down the line of so many other things may very well be the reality because every city and town in Massachusetts operating on its own and also competing for the people and competing for the dollars.
Right.
And we know there's a shortage of teachers, there's a shortage of fire personnel, there's a shortage of police officers, there's a shortage of people that want to work in town and that want to work at DPW. Eventually, you're hemorrhaging.
Sure.
And eventually,
Absolutely.
the towns with enormous amounts of dough are able to keep people and keep things going, and their citizens are like, well, we don't ever want anything to change, so we'll pay whatever you tell us to pay.
Right.
And then you have a lot of towns like Franklin who are kind of somewhat in the middle, right? Where we're like, well, yeah, we've got a lot of long-term people that can't afford a lot of these increases, but we also have new people coming to town with huge expectations and different budgets. How do we all figure this out? And you have volunteers like me who are trying really hard to do our best.
Absolutely.
Right?
I appreciate it because as a retired volunteer like me, I know the same budgets. I'm living on my Social Security and retirement income, and it's fixed. I'm not going to go back and work harder, and not going to go back and work overtime because those days are done.
No, I know, and it's I do enjoy it. I think it's a lot of work. I would sort of end with I'm not perfect. And
you're human like we all are.
And, and I would be lying if I said that sometimes I'm not shooting from the hip and just commenting because it's coming from the heart and it's coming from a place of care and concern. And my goal is never to alienate. My goal is not to continue the us versus them conversation. That is not my goal.
Right.
My goal is,
right.
But I also need people to understand that there are very serious issues with multiple departments in town. Like, we are not just talking about that schools aren't properly funded and that, which I know was a predominant conversation during the overrides. And I supported it, and I tried my best to get out there and educate. But people have to also understand that our police department needs more people, and they have cruisers, and they have equipment, and they're dealing with an inadequate facility. Our fire department, similar issues. Our senior center, and the library, and also, like, probably the most important of all of those right now comes to DPW, because we've been chipping away at that at gigantic levels. People may not realize it or understand, but it's the one area where we've been like, okay, we got to take 500,000, we got to take $1 million, we got to take because it's not personnel, it's a sidewalk not getting fixed, or a road not getting fixed, or a pipe not getting fixed, or
happening,
whatever it might be, which you can get by for a bit, but eventually that list catches up with you.
And it's going to cost more, as Brutus
has said. The longer you wait, the more expensive these things become, right? Because you're not patching it, you're having to replace the whole thing. And I was so glad
that it used to be $1 million a mile. I don't know what it is today, but I'm sure it's a little bit more than $1 million a mile.
But I often get kind of laughed at for being the sidewalk guy. But I'm like, if we somehow, some way could do a little segment of sidewalk in a neighborhood and show people some progress and chip away at it over time.
Well, and one of the zoning pieces I would advocate for is, while we've got like a cannabis overlay district, et cetera, so cannabis operations can be in a certain place based on the zoning, I think we need a sidewalk zoning overlay, because realistically, when people talk about sidewalks, they can be in some places where the road is built to have sidewalks. We, because of the way we grew, there are roads, Maple comes to mind, that really, realistically, couldn't have a sidewalk because it's not wide enough. Pond Street can have a sidewalk, right? So we need kind of that overlay so that everybody can understand, okay, where are the sidewalk possibilities, as opposed to, oh, I want a sidewalk. Well, you're on the street, you're never going to get one. Be realistic.
It's going to take some time.
That's a prior colleague of yours said, you need to go for the wishes and the needs, and prioritize the needs, and the wishes we'll get to at some point in time. But we need to have that discussion as to what is the need,
right?
Tiered perhaps, because there's going to be some more critical, et cetera, and then eventually you get to the wishes. But all those discussions are going to need to happen. For sure.
Yeah, and I do think I still put a sidewalk as a need and not a wish, because I think it's important, but we're not there yet.
No,
because
we've got other bigger
because human services come first.
Yeah,
right? We're not.
We've got other priorities.
We have to provide education to our kids. We need police officers. We need fire personnel. We need staff at the senior center. Like, those things have to come first. But I said at one of the last council meetings, I don't want to lose sight of dreaming little. No. Because I think then you get into this rut of like, oh my God, like, this is depressing. Yeah. But we're not really.
And that's we're not there, and that's going to be one of the key pieces from the messaging. Assuming things happen in some number of months, we have a strategic plan. The key piece is going to be taking and selling the plan, building the vision. This is the roadmap. This is what it's going to take. And oh, by the way, once we get down this part, we can relook and build another roadmap. And at least people will, one, be recognized. Okay, you've got sidewalks in there. I can see it down there. Sidewalks are there. And agree that there's a willingness to go this way because this is going to happen. And then the second part is going to be the execution, to make sure we truly deliver on that. And yes, things are going to happen. Things always will happen. But I think we're positioned financially. We've got some of the key, use the stabilization for the fire truck now and then bond it at some point. Those kinds of things can happen once you've got the plan. But if you're never with a plan, it becomes overwhelming.
And thank God we've had the foresight to have many of these stabilization accounts, because at least they may not be at their full funding levels, but at least we've got them.
Something.
And they're across many things. I guess the last piece I want to leave, I know you agree with me, but I hope the public listening will agree with me, is that we do need to look at restoring some of the staff to our town administrator's office.
Absolutely.
Right? Because
if we need the rest of the work to get done.
We have chipped away and chipped away and chipped away because of budget concerns to the point that what we're expecting of him is not possible any longer.
Yeah.
And whether we fund a deputy TA or whether we're, I know we're moving forward with bringing a communications person and at least a part-time administrative assistant for him. But you look at, again, trying to compare apples to apples, but you look at similar sized towns, they may have 12 to 15 people in their town administration office. Right. And we have to be having that conversation as a community, because if we don't, then we're going to find ourselves in a really, really difficult situation, which I don't think any of us want to see.
No, I concur.
Well, I think we've
Did
solved...
we cover everything?
We've solved at least half of the world's problems.
I don't know if we've solved anything, Steve, or if we just got to talk about a lot, but it's always a pleasure.
No, thank you for taking time to do that. Thank you for doing what you do, because, it gives me an opportunity to at least report on, this is happening, et cetera. Not that I would twiddle my thumbs anyway. I'd find something else to go reporting on, but we do appreciate your work in stepping up to do that, and your other counselors and school committee members. I mean, yeah.
I know.
It's us to solve.
It is a lot of work, but it's also enjoyable and rewarding.
Right.
So, and we are gonna disagree every now and again, and that's okay too.
Right. That's fine.
Right.
That's fine.
Just as long as it stays civil, right?
Yes. Civil discussion is what we need. And thank you, listeners, for doing this. Thank you again for doing this. And a quick reminder: we do this because Franklin matters.
We are now producing this in collaboration with Franklin TV and Franklin Public Radio. This podcast is my public service effort for Franklin, but we can't do it alone. We can always use your help. How can you help? If you can use the information that you find here, please tell your friends and neighbors. If you don't like something here, please let me know. Through this feedback loop, we can continue to make improvements. And I thank you for listening. For additional information, please visit franklinmatters.org. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me directly at suresteve@gmail.com. The music for the intro and exit was provided by Michael Clark and the group East of Shirley. The piece is titled Ernesto Mañana, copyright Michael Clark and Tintype Tunes in 2008, and used with their permission. I hope you enjoy. And by the way, you can also subscribe and listen to Franklin Matters Radio on your favorite podcast app. Search in podcasts for Franklin Matters.